These are the 10 questions that we need answers to in the upcoming 2025 NBA season. And the first question is, can Anthony Edwards become a top 5 player next season? Honestly, I think the main reason that they didn't make it to the NBA Finals last year was because the gap between him and Luka was just too big, even though Anthony Edwards had a much better roster around him. If Anthony Edwards can firmly establish himself as a top 5 player in the NBA, approaching the level of guys like Giannis, Jokic, SGA, Steph, and Joel Embiid, that would be crucial for Minnesota's growth. Unlike some of the top talent in the league, Anthony Edwards is a capable defender, which for me would be his ticket to the top 5, as it would be a reason for me to put him above guys like Curry, Luka, and LeBron at his advanced age. His defense in the postseason was elite, but it was his offense that continued to fall off the deeper he got into the playoffs. And as I said earlier about the gap between him and Doncic, that felt like the Grand Canyon at times in this series, as Luka was able to outplay him even though he was dealing with injuries. In the series, Luka put up 32, 9, and 8, along with over 2 steals per game on 49% shooting, compared to Anthony Edwards, who averaged 24, 8, and 8 with 1 steal, with his efficiency dropping to 43%. For the Timberwolves at large, there are some smaller areas for improvement and some internal growth that needs to be made, but the truth is the team's success largely depends on how far Anthony Edwards can take them. They've consistently improved as Anthony Edwards has gotten better. So the question is whether he's going to continue to improve, or will the team be only as good as they were last season, remaining a strong playoff team but not a true contender. While being a solid playoff team isn't the worst thing in the world, there's hope that next season the Minnesota Timberwolves could achieve even more than that, especially if Anthony Edwards is able to cement himself as a top 5 player in the league. The second question that needs to be answered in the next NBA season is, did the Dallas Mavericks get better or worse with the addition of Klay Thompson? What people are forgetting to mention when they talk about the Dallas Mavericks is how they essentially chose Klay over Derrick Jones Jr. In the years past, this would have been an absolute no-brainer, but last season Derrick Jones was great for Dallas, giving them a much-needed injection of defense and athleticism, which in turn allowed the team to play a faster brand of ball, which led them to the playoffs. Sure, his 3-ball isn't close to that of Klay Thompson, and the Boston Celtics took full advantage of that in the finals, but it's all the little things that Derrick Jones Jr. did for this Mavericks team that will be sorely missed with Klay Thompson. Klay used to be a two-way weapon back in his prime, but since the injuries, he's been unable to contribute at the same level defensively, at times turning into a liability. And when you're going to have Luka and Kyrie on the floor with him at the same time, the Mavericks defense could really take a severe hit next season. As we all know, defense wins championships and turns good teams into great ones. And that was the exact story for Dallas last season. To start last season, Dallas had a bottom 10 defense, but when they made the trades for Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington at the trade deadline, along with starting Derrick Jones Jr., they turned into a top 10 defense before the postseason. With some smart free agency moves, the Mavericks were able to bring back some more defense, such as Quentin Grimes, Najee Marshall, and of course the rookie Derek Lively. But the issue that still remains is in that projected starting lineup, there isn't much defense, as it's got me wondering, did Dallas actually get worse? The third question that needs to be answered next NBA season is if JJ Redick can lead the Lakers to a deep postseason run. After a first-round exit to Denver, the Los Angeles Lakers had to make a change at coach, firing Darvin Ham and signing JJ Redick. Obviously, JJ Redick is a brilliant basketball mind, and because of his previous connection with LeBron James on their podcast, that made him an obvious candidate. But that doesn't mean he's going to be a great NBA coach. That is really the question that we're asking here. As with no prior experience coaching at the highest level at all, this is going to be a challenge of a lifetime for JJ. In no way am I saying I don't think he deserved the role, as I think he has the potential to become an all-time great coach, but if I was the Lakers, I wouldn't have put all of my eggs into a basket of a first-year head coach. A prime example of this was the Milwaukee Bucks last season, who signed a rookie head coach with Adrian Griffin, and only 40 games into the season had to let him go in favor of a more experienced Doc Rivers. And it's not just a lack of experience that's a concern, but it's also the fact that he's going to be coaching the Lakers and LeBron James, as he's going to have to deal with all of the scrutiny that comes with that. Coaching LeBron in particular has not been an easy job throughout NBA history, as people were even calling for Eric Spoelstra's firing when he was with the Miami Heat, and even Ty Lue faced some criticism in Cleveland despite being one of the league's best coaches. Other than adding Dalton Connect, this roster is mostly the same as it was last year, so JJ Redick ends up being the biggest change the Lakers made last offseason, which we could look back on as an early red flag. So the question will stand and until it's answered. Can he turn things around with just his basketball knowledge? The fourth question that needs to be answered next NBA season is if Damian Lillard can have a bounce-back season with the Bucks. I think this answer depends on two things. First, was his last season's underperformance due to adjusting to a new environment, role, and context, or was it simply a decline in his skills? The next question is whether Doc can create an offensive system to make better use of Dame. Last year, I felt like the Bucks did not use Damian Lillard's scoring ability as well as they probably could have. I get that he's the second best player on the team, but I don't think he should have been treated as the second best offensive player on the team, as this was the mindset that Adrian Griffin had to start the season, and once Doc Rivers replaced him, it was too late to make drastic changes in the middle of a season. So this led to Damian Lillard being the second option on offense with a lot of off-ball possessions, which in hindsight was never going to be a smart decision. If last season was due to a different role instead of a decline in skills, I fully expect Damian Lillard to bounce back this season if Doc Rivers can create an offensive system where Dame is going to have the ball in his hands more times than not. The fifth question that needs to be answered next NBA season is if Mike Budenholzer can implement an actual offensive system with the addition of Tyus Jones. The thought of potentially bringing Bradley Beal off the bench is one that I'd love to see Phoenix explore. Last season was not one to write home about for Bradley Beal, as he only averaged 18 points per game. This was largely due to the fact that he was playing alongside Booker and Durant as the third option on offense. If he was to come off the bench, he would likely be the first or second option when he's on the floor, as this would not only benefit his individual numbers, but the team's success would follow that, as it would allow Tyus Jones to start in place of him. Jones is a pass-first point guard, which is something this team was sorely missing last season, as if he gets the starting role, the Suns will have a chance to craft an elite offensive system. However, even that's unlikely, as Coach Bud isn't known for having the most creative offensive schemes, as he tends to just stick with these strategies. And then because of Bradley Beal's large contract, it makes it very unlikely he would actually come off the bench. Personally, I would lean towards the Suns having the same issues as last season. But the truth is, Phoenix have all of the pieces required to have an elite offense with KD and Booker, but it's likely going to be egos that's going to get in the way of the team's success. The sixth question that needs to be answered before the next NBA season is, can the Celtics repeat in a tougher Eastern Conference? In the Eastern Conference, the number one question everybody is asking is if the Celtics can do it again. Last season, the Boston Celtics avoided facing all of their potential threats due to injuries. But now that those teams have improved and, knock on wood, should be more healthy, is Boston truly good enough to repeat? The New York Knicks have gotten better by adding Mikal Bridges, the Sixers were able to land Paul George in free agency, along with a plethora of high-level role players, and the Bucks should be stronger with a healthy roster, a better Damian Lillard, and quality additions such as Gary Trent Jr., Taurean Prince, and DeLon Wright. So if the Celtics have to play one or even two of these teams, can they be as dominant as they were against the easier opponents they faced last season? Some might not like to hear that Boston played easy opponents on the way to a championship, but it is true, as they didn't go up against any real contenders in the Eastern Conference, as the Miami Heat, Cleveland Cavaliers, and Indiana Pacers were not picked to win a championship, let alone make it out of the Eastern Conference. However, that is just how things panned out, as I don't think you can take the championship away from them just because they played who's in front of them. But does it make me wonder if they actually are capable of repeating? Absolutely, especially given how tough it's been to do so in the last decade. It's been 7 years since we've had back-to-back champions, which was the Golden State Warriors in 2018, and because of how talented the league is now, defending a title has been a near impossible feat for the last decade. The Celtics likely won't have the luxury that they experienced last season, but I would still bet on them to make it out of the Eastern Conference, as they're still my title favorites. The seventh question that needs to be answered next NBA season is, where does Julius Randle fit within the Knicks system? When I'm imagining the potential Knicks starting fives for next season, it's hard for me to imagine exactly where Randle fits in. He could probably play some small ball five, potentially giving them some versatile lineups, but honestly, I wouldn't want to see him in that role too much, as when they go up against teams like Milwaukee and Philadelphia, they won't be able to get away with this. So when they're playing taller teams like the Bucks and Sixers, where does Randle fit in? Is there a chance that he actually comes off the bench? Or if he does start, who do you put on the bench? The New York Knicks are stacked with talented wings, as the conversation would likely be between Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, and then you have Julius Randle. I couldn't possibly see Mikal Bridges come off the bench, and as for OG, he just signed a monster contract, so it'd be unlikely to see him come off the bench either. Then we saw last season just how important Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo were to this Knicks outfit, as they were perfect to go alongside Jalen Brunson, and because of their Villanova connection, the chemistry's there. Josh Hart in particular was able to finish through contact and get downhill, which allowed the New York Knicks to get out and run and catch teams off guard. For me, I just don't see where Julius Randle would make a positive impact within that offense, as usually Randle likes to slow it down and get an isolation look, which would interrupt this Knicks offense. I'm not saying Julius Randle is a bad player by any stretch, as he made the All-Star team last season, averaging 24, 9, and 5. But it comes back to how does his skill set fit within this new look Knicks team. This is certainly going to be an interesting storyline to follow next season, as if he doesn't fit in within this Knicks team, they're going to need to trade him at the deadline, and if they don't, it might cost them a chance at an NBA championship. The 8th question that needs to be answered next NBA season is, what is the ceiling with the Kings now having DeMar DeRozan? Personally, I think the ceiling is pretty high. I mean, I wouldn't put them in the top 3 teams in the Western Conference, but in that same light, I believe their floor is pretty low, just given how talented the Western Conference is. For me, the Kings' success is less about DeMar DeRozan and more about De'Aaron Fox. Before last season, Fox shot 32% from beyond the arc, which is well below league average. And to really give that some context, that's only 1 percentage point better than what Russell Westbrook was shooting with the Lakers. But then last season, De'Aaron Fox was able to up his numbers to 37% from 3 on 8 attempts per game, which helped the offensive flow of the Kings even more. But down the stretch of the season where Sacramento lost Monk and Herter, they experienced some offensive issues, as especially without Malik Monk, there wasn't a secondary shot creator present on the floor, which is of course where DeMar DeRozan comes in, as he's one of the best isolation scorers in NBA history. But one positive that did come from that stretch was the Kings realizing their defensive potential. Keon Ellis was a shining light for them, as in this time he earned a starting spot, playing tough, hard-nosed defense. So a big key for the Kings this season is going to be putting their best offensive and defensive performances forward at the same time. If they can do this, Sacramento will truly be an elite team in the Western Conference next season. Still though, the only thing that could hinder this team is a lack of floor spacing. With DeRozan, Ellis and Sabonis in the starting lineup, they could run into some issues. So instead of this, the Kings would likely put Herter back in over Ellis, but what that's going to do is put them back to being a bad defensive team. So Sacramento is going to need to do a lot of juggling to figure out exactly what their best starting lineup even looks like. But if they are able to figure it out and get their best efforts on both sides of the floor at the same time, this Sacramento Kings team will be no joke next season. The 9th question that needs to be answered next NBA season is if we think a year 2 leap from Victor Wembanyama will be good enough to make a postseason appearance. For me, if Victor Wembanyama isn't already a top 20 player in the NBA, I wouldn't be surprised if he puts forward a campaign that cements himself as a top 10 player by the end of the season. The addition of Chris Paul is going to be an impactful one, as even at his advanced age, his basketball IQ is still elite, as last season Wemby's teammates often didn't get him good enough looks at the basket. Chris Paul will likely be better in that role, as he's one of the best passers in the history of basketball. And if we look at his time with the Clippers, he made a far less talented DeAndre Jordan into an all-star off the back of his playmaking. Because of CP3 being in the twilight of his career, he's just not the same scoring threat that he used to be, which has made playmaking a little bit more difficult, because in a pick and roll with Victor, the defense will likely leave him open, which is going to put him in a tough spot. And then when you look at the rest of the roster, I'm not sold on that either. I think Devin Vassell has a bright future, but at this point in time, he hasn't got a consistent shot to get to, and he's not a good playmaker either. Then you have Keldon Johnson, who just seems like the odd man out on this roster, as he's not a strong defender or playmaker. Trey Jones is a fine player, as he's smart with the ball in hand, rarely turning it over, but other than that, he's pretty limited when it comes to scoring or playing any defense. The other addition the Spurs made, though, was to bring in Harrison Barnes, and personally, I don't love or hate this move. What it does do, though, is bring another needed vet to the locker room, but when we look to a team's performance on the court, I don't think this signing moves the needle too much for me. So is a second-year leap from Victor Wembanyama going to be good enough to put the Spurs back into the postseason, despite his teammates not playing elite-level ball? Or is Wemby really going to need his role players to stand up if they're even going to have a chance for postseason contention? The 10th question that needs to be answered next NBA season is, what does a closing lineup look like for OKC? With the newly constructed Twin Towers front court of Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein, the OKC Thunder have some decisions to make. Because of the size of the deal, there's no chance Hartenstein Hartenstein comes off the bench, which means Chet will likely be moved to the 4. On paper, this shouldn't hurt Chet's game, as he does have some limitations when it comes to playing the 5, as he doesn't have much weight on him. And Chet, even in his rookie season, was able to be a threat from deep, shooting 36% from beyond the arc. This, paired with his limitations that he does have playing the 5, makes a Twin Towers front court of Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein seem like it could actually work. Then when we move on to the Isaiah Hartenstein piece of the puzzle, he's going to be able to help fix a lot of the issues this Thunder team had last season, which was rebounding and interior defense. With the Knicks in the postseason, Hartenstein was a big reason why they were able to be so good when health was on their side, as he grabbed big time offensive rebounds and came up with timely stops. The addition of Hartenstein works because last season the Thunder had a 5-out offense. So given Hartenstein's inability to connect on long balls, this shouldn't be much of an issue. On offense though, he's not a complete liability, as he does have a soft touch around the basket, as he's got a go-to floater, while also being a savvy playmaker out of a dribble handoff situation. With Brunson, the Knicks would go to this a lot to start a possession, and now I think he's just going to be able to do the same thing with SGA. So the real question surrounding OKC is how will his negative floor spacing impact the team? And will his rebounding and defense be able to make up for that? Is there a question I forgot to mention coming into next season? And if so, let me know in the comments below.